Boy has the lowest stats in a new world, yet the demon lord is scared of him. If you dig my recaps, don't forget to subscribe and smash that notification bell. Under a heavy rain, the melancholic air contrasted with the heavy current of the aqueduct where a couple walked as if it were a beautiful sunny day in the park. As they approached the rapids, the man said this was the true man-eating river. Leaning on his arm, the woman beside him called out for the sensei to leave, so they tied a rope connecting their wrists, and thus the man declared they would be together forever. Suddenly, a runaway truck appeared on the muddy road and ran over the couple. On this day, a certain great author and his lover left this world. After this tragedy, the man woke up in an unknown sanctuary, looking around with a strange disinterest at his foiled plan. Analyzing the statue of an angel, he supposed this was the world we go to after death, a place with a rather Western style. However, a woman appeared and explained that this was not the destination for the dead. Introducing herself as the guide for those who descend to this world, she said her name was Annette. According to her, the newly deceased was chosen to enter this land, surrounded by darkness Zauberberg, to become a hero who must bring light and hope. Showing no motivation with what was said, the man realized that in other words, besides having failed in his plan to take his life alongside his lover, he was also brought to this strange place without his consent. With a slight laugh, he put his hand on his head and stated that his life had always been a great shame. Without time for the young man's drama, Annette warned that he had an urgent mission to fulfill, but the hero had swallowed several sedatives to leave this life behind. Desperate, Annette detoxified him with her magic, although he didn't like it much. The guide ordered the adventurer to get up to fulfill his destiny of saving this planet, but the renowned author wanted nothing to do with heroism. He just wanted to die, period. While the woman fumed as she explained that he was the chosen one, he gathered the sedatives from the ground and slowly swallowed a few, then laughed sarcastically and emphasized that he hadn't asked to be chosen for anything. Annette asked if he was visited by a truck, and remembering the moment of the accident, he said yes. So she explained that it was the selection truck for the other world running over heroes, who among all the depressed people who lived on planet Earth, only those crushed by the sweet rubber of the tire could start from scratch and build a life truly worth living in this world of adventures. However, in the author's mind, his only chance of being happy was jumping into that stream with his beloved, and that elf with a pope hat ruined everything, saying that he asked who they were to decide whether someone was unhappy or not. Internally, Annette cursed the man for his ingratitude. Anyway, she was sure he would change his mind when he saw the status he gained in this place, because every human brought here receives the ability to wield superhuman powers. The thing is, as soon as she saw the man's status, he was a complete weakling with a measly 1 point of life and poisoned. The guy was practically a walking corpse. Not wanting to let it go, the guide searched every corner of the status for any special ability she might have missed, but all she found were packs of cigarettes, sedatives, and a notebook with a pen in the inventory. There was no way around it. The guy was indeed a human slime with lung cancer. Not that he was disappointed, as he had no expectations, but the author turned his back and announced that he was leaving. Feeling guilty, Annette grabbed his wrist and apologized for everything, assuming they might have brought him by mistake. Given that the guy was extremely weak, she made it clear that he would not survive in this world. Once again, he laughed and replied that this had always been his life, whether in his original world or now. Not wanting to leave the human adrift, Annette asked him to stay inside for now, as going out would expose him to the many dangers outside, but the sensei didn't expect to live. On the contrary, he wouldn't mind giving up everything to never exist again, saying that he turned and left while the guide watched with teary eyes, noting that this human was different from the others. There was a time when Annette took pride in guiding inhabitants from another world, welcoming people with open arms and getting excited to meet all kinds of folks from an alternate reality. Until one day she received an arrogant boy who was one of those employees exploited to the bone by his company, and the idea of becoming a hero went to his head. Arrogant, the kid bragged about everything he did, and every time Annette found herself praising the guy's performance without thinking that maybe she had become just a hero worshiper instead of a woman guiding the representatives of light in this world. So to reverse this situation, she asked Sensei to at least find a profession before leaving, and he turned with a smirk and informed her that he was already a born writer, nothing more, nothing less. He said goodbye to the girl with the pretty ears and left for good. As the sanctuary gate closed, Annette was sure she had been waiting for this man to arrive. Instead of a thrush or a vulture in this world, fierce and aggressive dragon dragons flew in the skies. Beneath them on the ground walked the depressive writer who didn't understand a single thing written on the direction signs. As if that weren't enough, he had no doubt that he would never find a cup of coffee around there. Out of nowhere, some internal system alerted that the guide discovered the landmark Great Plains of Erston, earning him 5 experience points. With a terrible headache, Sensei asked the voice to stop talking inside his ear, but the system then announced that he had leveled up to level 2 using a noisy, heroic symphony in the background. Next, he notices the presence of a death tree holding a girl hostage, and she begs the adventurer for help, assuming that's what he is, of course. However, the writer doesn't lift a finger. He just observes, noting that today is the day he meets people with strange ears. Regardless, he acknowledges that women on the brink of death have a unique charm, so he asks the girl if he can write a romance based on her. She screams to be saved again, and he finally realizes she needs help, so he stretches his arms up to grab her, but his height isn't enough. The girl asks if he has a sword or spell, but just as he's about to answer, Sensei is also grabbed by the death tree. At least he's relieved it's by the neck, because it cuts off his air supply. With little time left, he says it was a pleasure to meet her, but she doesn't feel the same. Pleasure is something they won't experience when the tree uses its suction to steal their life force. In other words, they have only a few minutes to live. Hanging by his neck, this is the news Sensei had prayed for. As he feels weaker, he sings the song, "I Have to Go Now," until his neck bends forward in his final moments. An ominous energy escapes his body, spreading through the death tree's branches until it consumes the entire structure, causing an explosion that frees the prisoners. While Sensei laments not having died, the system announces that 300 damage was inflicted by the adventurer's poison. To make his headache worse, the symphony returns to announce another level up. Curious about all this, the cat girl asks what his deal is because he pretended to be weak, yet after what just happened, he clearly has some sophisticated tricks up his sleeve, but he doesn't answer her question. He just reflects that for the 5th time he asked for death and death did not come. In a way, he doesn't know who's winning this contest. The girl says she doesn't know why the guy is depressed, but she's happy he survived, so she thanks him for the help, invites him to her home, and asks the adventurer's name. He says he's called Sensei, and when the man feels his hand being pulled by the girl, he immediately remembers Seiken, who said the exact same thing the cat girl did when they were about to kill themselves. Thinking about this, he wonders if Seiken also came to this world while repeating his beloved's name over and over. Thinking the guy is calling her by that name, the cat girl tries to correct him by telling her real name, but all Sensei does is repeat Seiken's name. With the arrival of the breeze, the writer finds a reason to live amidst this insanity. Come what may, he will find Seiken wherever she is. With the red string tied around his wrist, he intends to reunite with the woman of his life so they can continue the plan that went wrong last time. Meanwhile, Annette prays to the gods of Zauberberg to protect this adventurer, hoping to meet him again one day. Contrary to her expectations, her wish is granted sooner than she imagined because it was Sensei opening the door at that very moment. Excited even though she met the guy 20 minutes ago, she runs to him like he returned from war after 4 years of marriage until the cat girl shows up behind him, killing the mood. Not wanting to be involved, Sensei announces he's looking for a lady named Seiken, making the guide go crazy with each new woman entering the story. Whether malicious or not, Annette says she has no idea who that is, so Sensei sets off on his quest without a single clue. The cat girl reassures him that she's sure the lady is somewhere around, and since it's still a long way to her house, she invites her companion to make a stop in the city of Roth Castle. With that, she pulls Sensei by the arm, and Annette immediately shows up to teach the feline a lesson, saying it's absurd to hold a man's hand in public. Confused, the cat girl asks why this woman is following them, but the guide has no answer. With that, the short girl assumes Annette has her eye on Sensei, driving Annette crazy, trying to justify herself in every possible way, emphasizing that her job is to guide the inhabitants of the other world. Hearing this, the cat girl discovers Sensei is not from this planet, which explains why he's so strong. Annette is confused because his stats say otherwise, so the girl explains that Sensei killed the Tree of Life with a single attack and saved her life. Imagining that her rescue created an intimate bond between them, Annette starts feeling sick with jealousy, kneeling and exuding a dark aura while cursing the cat girl. Ignoring the drama, Sensei finds a perfect bed for himself and announces he's going to take a nap and to wake him when they reach the city. He bids farewell to Annette and Tama before closing the coffin. The cat girl complains that's not her name, making the guide laugh and boast she was called by the correct name. The journey truly begins with Annette pulling Sensei's coffin by a rope, which snaps from the force she exerted. In the late afternoon, in a palace located somewhere in this unknown world, a young maiden gazes at the beautiful sea view from a balcony. Returning to Sensei, the girls had been dragging the boy for so long that the cat girl lost her patience and told him to walk on his own, but there was no response. Annette checked to see if the guy had died, but his status indicated he was just taking a nap. Since they were close to their destination, the elf asked Tama to carry the coffin again, which made the cat girl complain once more that that wasn't her name. Inside the coffin, Sensei dreamed of having his beloved Sakin in his arms again so they could finish what they had started. After some time, the group arrived in the city of Roth, and the writer began to grasp that he was in a completely different world. This realization sparked his artistic side with all the things he could never have imagined seeing in his life. Amidst this, Annette announced she would request an audience with the king. Once in the throne room, the supreme ruler of Roth introduced himself as Thomas alongside his daughter Charlotte. The king offered the group accommodations in the castle for the night, which made the travelers smile, but there was a condition. Since he loved hearing stories from travelers, he wished the adventurers would share their experiences and memories with him. Considering he had just arrived and wasn't the most proactive adventurer in the world, Sensei asked if it was enough to talk about what it was like to sleep in a coffin, making Thomas think it was a death threat. To divert attention from this topic, Annette commented that Princess Charlotte was very beautiful, and besides thanking for the compliment, the king informed them that she would soon be married. Moreover, he wanted to ask for advice about it. Before explaining further, he asked two men to enter the throne room. According to the sovereign, there were two candidates for the princess's hand, the brave knight Gomez and Otto, the wandering minstrel of love. The king explained that perhaps due to the influence of the demon king of wrath, monster activity had recently increased. Considering his age, Thomas couldn't deal with this great threat alone. Therefore, one of these two would become Charlotte's husband, and the next king who would face the threats to Roth alongside the future queen. However, since the princess had not yet chosen which option she wanted, Thomas would like the candidates to weigh in. After pondering this matter for a few seconds, Sensei said he had no idea, as this choice would determine the future of the princess and the kingdom as a whole, and it shouldn't be placed on the shoulders of strangers who had just arrived and were unknown to everyone. To conclude, Sensei commented that Thomas was a horrible tyrant king who didn't deserve the crown he wore. With that said, the two women accompanying the boy tried to smooth over the situation in every way, explaining that this guy came from another world and didn't know how to behave appropriately in this place. At night, the writer gazed out the window of his room with a melancholic expression until Annette woke up and asked if he was having trouble sleeping. In truth, Sensei confessed that he never could sleep, which left the elf speechless for a moment. Stammering, she asked who this Sakin he always talked about was, but before he could answer, the cat girl's tail poked out from under the blanket, revealing that she had been sleeping on the writer's lap the whole time. Annoyed by this, Annette scolded the girl for resting on a gentleman's legs, while the cat girl argued that she was protecting herself from the cold because that's what her kind did. Furthermore, she accused the elf of being jealous, which was why she was making such a fuss. In the middle of their argument, Sensei left the room to get some air and decided to take a walk around the castle. On the same balcony she occupied most of her days, Charlotte was contemplating the view of the water under the moonlight, and Sensei arrived commenting that the landscape was indeed wonderful. In fact, the lake was so beautiful it made him want to drown in it, according to his words. Charlotte expressed her indignation at these death-related words, which made the boy laugh, since she was far more concerned about his life than he was. Changing the subject as she was worried about her future and the fate of the country, the princess confessed she couldn't choose between Gomez and Otto. The knight, although he had recently arrived in the kingdom, was already beloved by everyone and had become an authority among the soldiers, earning the king's trust. The girl thought she should choose this warrior for these reasons, but on the other hand, Otto was her childhood friend. Whenever she felt depressed, the minstrel sang songs that soothed her soul. Upon hearing this, Sensei noted that Charlotte was a kind girl who cared about her father unlike him. The author's life had been a complete disaster with multiple suicide attempts deeply affecting his parents. Throughout his existence, Sensei had never asked anyone to choose how he should live. With that said, he believed the princess should decide for herself what she truly desired. The next day, the king gathered the group of travelers in the throne room again so they could witness his daughter's decision about the marriage. Annette remarked that for the good of the kingdom, surely the young woman had chosen Gomez, while the cat girl thought the musician suited the princess better. At that moment, Thomas asked his daughter to stand before the chosen man and make her vows. She slowly walked up to Sensei, took his hand, and declared that she would end her life with this man. Everyone around was shocked by the declaration, and Annette even fainted. Charlotte explained that as she had said the previous day, Otto sang songs to her when she was feeling depressed. But when she thought about it, she realized he also appeared when she was fine, even annoying her all night with a new song. Besides that, she didn't want to marry Gomez because the guy had a bit of a strong smell. Desperate, Thomas approaches his daughter and urges her to choose one of the men offered to her. However, his daughter stands her ground and condemns her father's attitude, pointing out that he wants to force her into marriage without even caring about her opinion. In truth, the girl didn't even want to get married, but no one considered her feelings in one of the most important decisions of her life except for the traveling writer. Sensei was the only one who listened to the princess and asked what she wanted to do with her life. In the midst of this, Gomez reveals why he didn't have a pleasant odor, as he removes his armor, revealing himself to be a minotaur, a servant of the demon king of wrath. The monster's initial plan was to ascend to the throne by marrying the princess and then delivering her to his master. But his true identity was discovered. Sensei asks the young woman if she realized the man was a monster, but she had only sensed the foul smell coming from him, nothing more. Embarrassed by the conversation, the Minotaur puts an end to the insults and declares that he no longer needs to ascend the throne, so he will simply kill everyone. As the cat girl tries to wake Annette, the kingdom's guards attack the monster, but they are all easily defeated. A pillar destroyed by the monster's punch almost falls on the elf, but the cat girl saves her just in time. Not taking it lightly, she counterattacks with a knee to the giant bull's face, showing that she won't be defeated as easily as the soldiers. Otto plays a melody called Song of the Nameless Hero, making the cat girl think she was being empowered, but the music was useless, merely adding to the fight's atmosphere. Speaking of which, the Minotaur attacks his opponent with his horns, but she dodges and strikes the bull again. Despite the initial advantage, the cat girl is hit by the enemy's horn, which was extremely strong and sharp. Taking advantage of this weapon's power, the Minotaur announces he will gather all his strength for the next strike. Sensei interrupts the fight by calling the monster a little cow and asks him to kill the kingdom's newest couple first. After all, the princess had rid herself of her idiotic father, and the little cow's fantastic horns seemed the most stylish way to reach the afterlife. Everyone around is shocked by the man's stance, except the Minotaur, who would gladly do as asked, then kill the king, everyone in the room, all the kingdom's citizens, and finally set everything on fire until nothing remained. While Charlotte seems distressed by this statement, Sensei responds that it's fine with him because he won't be alive anyway. Thus, the Minotaur wishes the couple to enjoy life after death and charges at them. However, on the brink of death, Charlotte gives up on the idea and, crying, decides to live and protect the people of this kingdom. Hearing this, Sensei comments that the princess was as kind as he imagined and then pushes the girl out of the horn's path, saying she isn't fit to be his death partner. At this moment, Annette awakens and conjures a strong light barrier that blocks the Minotaur's passage. The elf declares she will never let Sensei die as long as she's around. Besides blocking the attack, the level 18 cleric manages to destroy the enemy's powerful horn, and this time even the cat girl is impressed by her colleague's talent. Calling the cat girl Tama once again, Annette asks her to do her part, so Tama charges at the giant bull with a wildcat strike. The force of this power was so great that it sent the massive creature outside the castle, devastating the wall and throwing him into the lake. When the adrenaline subsides, Tama turns her face away from the elf, awkwardly thanking her for saving her life. Annette smiles and says the same, also thanking her for being saved by the cat girl. Behind them, Otto announces he will turn this friendship into a song, but Tama tells him to run away. While Charlotte watched the landscape she loves through the hole in the wall, her father kneels before his daughter and begs for forgiveness for not considering her feelings at such an important moment. In tears, the king implores the princess's forgiveness, who touches her father's shoulder and says that from now on she wants to be heard regarding the kingdom's problems and her life as a whole. With that said, the two embrace lovingly and cry together in reconciliation. Sensei observes that he failed to die once again. A day later, a soldier alerts about the arrival of monsters near the south gate, so the queen orders her royal guard to exterminate the threat. Sitting on the throne with her crown, she remembers that the kingdom must be protected and relies on her men for this. Then all the soldiers bow and exalt Her Majesty Queen Charlotte. Dragging Sensei once more, his two companions comment on the princess's audacity in becoming the ruler of Roth, but worry about a 16-year-old girl having to deal with the challenges of governing a kingdom and its people. Overhearing the conversation, Sensei comments from inside the coffin that the girl chose this for herself, so they shouldn't worry about anything. Finally, he notes that women on the verge of death are beautiful, but those who rise on their own are equally wonderful. Speaking of which, as the writer is dragged, Tama asks if the guy can walk on his own, being a fan of such a thing. On the other hand, distracted Sensei analyzes the beauty of the blue sky that illuminates his deep dark circles. After a long journey dragging the tomb of the depressed writer, Tama can't take it anymore and needs a break to eat something. When she stops pulling the coffin, Sensei shows up and asks if it's time to eat. Annette gives him some bread and he asks if there's any cooked tofu by chance. The elf has no idea what that is, so the author closes the coffin lid while she writes down the name of the food to look for in the next town. Heading towards groom Tama's hometown, the cleric estimates that they should arrive in a few days' journey. However, she would like to stop by the Zweitan temple first because inhabitants of other worlds arrive through one of the 4 temples in this universe and from there depart for the Demon King's castle. But Sensei's goal is not to defeat the Demon King, it's to find Sekon. Therefore, they need to visit these 4 temples to gather information. Since the group will have to travel the entire world to do this, Tama asks if the elf is crazy, but the truth is she just doesn't want Sensei to face the Demon King because she fears for his safety, even though it's her mission as a guide. Faced with this, Tama comments that the cleric must really like the human. She tries to explain that it's not exactly as the cat girl thinks, but that Sensei showed her the light when she had already lost hope in her work. Tama asks what will happen if this Sekon turns out to be his girlfriend, and Annette confesses that she's on the journey to find that out as well. The cat girl agrees to accompany the group, but only until her hometown. By the way, she wants to know if they'll be able to enter the temple since Annette abandoned her job. The elf assures her that the head priestess of the Zweitan temple is a great friend and will let them in. Moreover, she didn't leave the job without notice because she sent her familiar to deliver the resignation letter. Tama asks if it's that creature eating Sensei's head, so Annette retrieves the familiar and discovers that it didn't even do what it was asked to do, so she throws it away. Scared, the bat is consoled by the man who understands that the familiar returned to its beloved mistress, but that she is furious because of the undone task. Either way, he names the familiar Milos, making the creature happy and spinning in the sky. With that, the human goes back to sleep while Annette tries to accept that she left her job without warning. Suddenly, Milos panics and starts screaming, then quickly flies away. No one understands what's going on until a strong wind hits the group, revealing a dragon that lands in front of them. The girls think they won't make it out alive until a girl appears behind them and commands Ruka to calm down. Approaching the beast, she recites some words in a strange language and strokes the creature's snout, calming it with the sound of her voice. Annette and Tama can hardly believe what they're seeing, so they ask who this girl is, but instead of answering, she emphasizes that this is a very dangerous place. She reinforces this by noting the coffin behind the girls, which means they have already suffered a loss. However, Sensei shows up and asks if it's time to eat. The two apologize, explaining that this guy is a bit eccentric and comes from another world. Upon discovering that he's a foreigner, the Dragon Master decides to kill him because her goal is to destroy all inhabitants of other worlds. When attacked with magic, Annette conjures a shield that holds for a few seconds, but the barrier soon breaks, allowing the magic to destroy everything around them. Weakened, Annette and Tama use the little energy they have left to stand up and protect Sensei. In response, the enemy casts another spell that stuns them and displays the mark of the Demon King of Wrath. Despite Annette's despair, Sensei Sensei stands up and says that this dangerous behavior must stop because the dragon's problem is with the inhabitants of other worlds, not these two locals. With that, he steps in front of the girl and says he is her opponent, not the other two, and she can do whatever she wants because he's prepared to die at any moment. Without hesitation, the girl thrusts her hand into the human's chest, ending his life. As she leaves, she reveals that her name is Waldelia and hopes that the being from another world finally rests in peace. Despite this, Sensei gets up and acknowledges that Waldelia harbors deep hatred. In fact, he once wanted to harm someone so badly that he sent a threatening letter. At that time, he lost himself in his own anger, and knowing that feeling, he assumes this girl is going through the same thing. He touches Waldelia's face, who is shocked seeing the scene as if she were in front of a ghost or some kind of undead. Sensei sees the sadness in her eyes and asks her the reason, but Waldelia decides to flee as quickly as possible, calling Ruka to take her away. High in the sky on the dragon's back, she wonders who that man is. Days later, in the region of Donnerstag, the head priestess of the Zweiten Temple hears someone knocking at the door during a storm. Opening the door, Usha sees a familiar in the shape of a flying carpet carrying a man and two injured women. The priestess recognizes Annette among the three and holds her in her arms, but the cleric warns that the biggest problem is the man. With that, the temple leader asks for all the healing potions to be brought as well as all available priests. The next day, all patched up Sensei took advantage of the beautiful sunny afternoon to drop by the market and take a sip of a poison that was being sold at one of the street stalls. Tama questioned how the guy had the courage to do that right after being miraculously healed, and he replied that he recovered so well that he actually felt worse. Regardless of the nonsense the man spoke, Tama slapped the bottle out of his hand, making it fall to the ground. Right then, Annette thanked her priestess friend for the help and vowed to repay her in some way. Besides that, she asked if her friend knew a being from another world named Sakin, but Usha didn't know who that was. Speaking of which, Usha questioned why her colleague was traveling with a being from another world, especially after leaving her job without notice. Either way, the priestess was relieved to hear the news because she always thought Annette was too pure for a job like that. However, traveling with a transferred human is very questionable because transferred ones are known for their dubious character, especially when they receive the gift to face the Demon King. These powerful abilities usually go to the humans' heads, making them extremely vain and egocentric. In the meantime, out of nowhere, a rapper named Kotaro invited the elves to have fun with him while he dropped a contagious flow. His super powerful ability is mass production, which multiplies money infinitely, and he was willing to spend some of that cash on them. After kicking the rapper out rudely, Usha used that human as an example to illustrate what the transferred ones are like, but Annette explained that Sensei is not like the others. About that, Usha already knew just by looking at the guy's face, because it was certainly the face of a destructive man, and she believed that this human would ruin her friend's life if she insisted on traveling with him. The thing is, Sensei changed Annette's life, and she understood that she wouldn't be who she is now if she hadn't met him. Speaking of the devil, Sensei showed up asking for money to buy medicine, and while dropping a bunch of coins into his hand, Annette emphasized that this guy is not destructive at all. Despite thinking that he had already destroyed Annette herself, Usha questioned what gift this transferred one had, assuming it couldn't be much since their group was defeated easily. Then her friend explained that he had no power at all, but still he risked his own life to save her and Tama from the Demon King of Wrath. In shock, Usha wanted to know what story that was, because the Demon King of Wrath had been destroyed by another transferred one a week ago. Meanwhile, in a dark castle, a man told a dragon that it could bark all it wanted because its master was not coming back. Sitting on the beast master's bloody throne, the man said he had already dealt with him. Near the castle, Waldelia assumed her father was inside. Upon hearing that the Demon King of Wrath had already been destroyed, Tama was also shocked, and Annette thought that this would finally bring peace back to Zauberberg. The Catwoman celebrated, but wondered who that girl with the dragon was then. Moreover, Sensei himself had arrived a week ago, and if the danger had already been eliminated, it wouldn't make sense to bring another transferred one here. At that moment, Sensei tore up the papers he was writing on and lay down on the ground, asking the girls to write on his tombstone, "Here lies a writer who doesn't write." Tama asked what he was up to, and Sensei explained that he had tried to translate his experiences in this new world into words, but had so far failed to write anything, and that was driving him to despair. Rubbing her hands, Annette asked how the author described their first meeting meeting, but froze upon learning that the guy hadn't mentioned a word about her. On the other hand, when he met Waldelia, he felt a wave of creativity, and for that reason he couldn't understand why he was stuck. Faced with this, Annette invited the guy for a walk around the city to relax a bit, as she had already been thinking about buying some things for him. Said and done, the elf dragged the human to the market and gave him armor the size of a giant because she didn't want him getting stabbed in the chest by some random hand anymore. Unable to walk inside the armor, Sensei received his helmet in the end. Annette asked him not to go anywhere without them, but he ended up staying behind when they continued on their way. Usha was passing by and got startled by the man in armor, so he explained that he was looking for new inspiration in the city. Taking advantage of meeting the writer, the elf announced that from now on Annette would stay with her, because the young woman trusted people too much and Usha was sure that the transferred one would ruin her in some way. Sensei said that the cleric was not a bird in a cage, so she could decide what to do with her life on her own. In the middle of this discussion, a transferred one appeared, drawing everyone's attention. Dropping the flow, Kotaro announced the arrival of the man created by the heavens to be above all, and his name was Suzuki. Soon the champion transferred one called the people of Vale and informed everyone that the demon king of wrath had been defeated, so peace would reign again in this world. Speaking of which, everyone owed this peace to the transferred ones who brought the victory, and for that reason Suzuki announced the great era of heroes which would be ruled by them. Meanwhile, Kotaro pointed to Annette and denounced that it was the elf who was violent with him. Faced with this, Suzuki approached the cleric, questioning how she could act against a hero who had brought peace back to Zauberberg. Upon reaching her, the transferred one placed his hand on the elf's head and asked her to be a good girl. Shortly after, amid the burning city of Vale, Sensei found inspiration to write his masterpiece. It so happened that Suzuki had used a skill to turn Annette into a pet. The transformation caused mutations in some parts of the elf's body, such as her eyes, which acquired darkened contours. Kotaro uses his rap to mock the fact that the purer a person is, the easier they fall into this spell, which was the case with the victim. Tama confronts the rapper, but Suzuki uses the same technique on the Catwoman, taming her just like her companion. With this, the human boasts about the power of this skill, claiming that no one is capable of escaping it. Emerging from the crowd, Usha steps forward to confront the transferee, stating that this was not how she taught Suzuki to use his gift. As she declares that the city of Vale will not bow to the whims of the human, all the inhabitants join the priestess's chorus and rise against the oppressor. Seeing this, Suzuki sends his wolves against the population, saying he will destroy everything to build another city in its place, given that Vale does not want to surrender. Usha calls the human a bastard, and he sarcastically responds that he prefers to be called a hero, just as the elf did when they first met. To further provoke, he assures that he will use Usha's church as his private castle. Shortly after, due to the wolves' power, which spit fireballs at the city's houses, Vale begins to burn. Even Tama attacks the residents, and one of the victims is Sensei, who is protected by his gigantic armor. After dozens of kicks and punches to the equipment, the girl manages to crack the steel until she destroys the armor, but the immense force she applied ended up throwing the armor's helmet at her head, knocking Tama out instantly. Thus, Sensei locks Tama in a barrel and leaves a warning that there is a violent cat inside. At that moment, he sees Usha being overwhelmed in battle. Enraged, the elf tells Sensei that this is how the transferees act in this world, using the gift they received for their selfish ends. Usha emphasizes that Suzuki was not like this when he arrived. On the contrary, he was a calm boy with a weak personality. As she starts this story, Sensei begins to write down what is said, as this type of character intrigues him. For this reason, the author asks which way the transferee went, and Usha says he headed towards the church, but reminds the writer that he does not have a gift, therefore he will have no chance against Suzuki. Regardless, all Sensei wants is to write his masterpiece, something he felt compelled to do. Not wanting to let the man go alone, Usha accompanies him. Upon reaching the church gate, Sensei is enchanted by the beauty and grandeur this place exudes. On the other hand, Usha cannot understand how this man can be so carefree, as the transferee possesses superhuman power, so it would be wise to have a plan before entering the church. That said, Sensei takes a vial of poison and drinks it all. Usha was thinking of silently approaching the back door, but the human had already opened the door by then. Inside, Sensei admits that he is interested in Suzuki's story and would love to write a novel based on what the transferee experienced. Faced with this statement, Suzuki becomes even more arrogant, having an author wanting to write about his heroic exploits in another world. However, Sensei notes that it is quite the opposite. The story is about a man who gains more power than he deserves and ends up falling into his own greed. Insulted, Suzuki promises not to let it go unpunished, so he orders his wolves to kill the intruders. Seeing that Sensei will not lift a finger to prevent his death, Usha steps forward and shoots rays of light to kill some wolves, but one of them grabs the cleric's magic staff with its teeth, taking her out of the fight. With this, Suzuki orders the other wolves to shoot flames at the writer, and this time Usha cannot do anything. However, when the fireballs approach, Sensei deflects them, all using the helmet of the armor he wore, throwing the flames back at the attackers, causing a massive explosion. The helmet then reveals that it was actually Milos deflecting the spells, as Annette had said that the armor was capable of deflecting first-level spells. After the flames dissipate, Kotaro begins to worry that these enemies are not as weak as they thought, but Suzuki reminds him that he still has a trump card, the giant wolf. Without delay, the transferee uses his number one pet to bite Sensei, which indeed happens. The bite draws blood from the man's shoulder until the poison spreads through the animal's body, killing it instantly. While Usha heals, the human Kotaro panics at what he witnessed, so he runs away from there. Usha demands the transferee surrender, but Suzuki is not done yet, as he saved his big trump card for the end. As soon as he orders Annette to attack, the elf draws a dagger and charges at Usha, who never imagined this would happen one day. The priestess refuses to fight against her friend, so she intends to retreat, but Sensei has a better idea. While he takes the lead in the fight, he tells Usha that Annette is stronger than she thinks. Suzuki laughs at the writer's attitude, believing that his domestication skill cannot be cancelled, but Sensei is sure that the elf can still choose her own destiny, and it is not Suzuki who will dictate it for her. With her neck against Annette's blade, Sensei asserts that his companion is not a bird in a cage. As she heard these words, the elf held the blade with her own hand, as if she were in an internal struggle between beheading the human or sparing him. Losing patience, Suzuki reinforces his commands, using more mana, causing Annette to feel physical pain from the internal conflict. Inside her consciousness, she was like a bird in a cage until Sensei appeared to say something that encouraged the elf to stab the dagger into her own leg. Having done that, she collapses and Sensei catches the cleric before she falls. She then returns to normal to Usha's relief. Speaking of which, Sensei asks the priestess to heal her friend, which she does while recalling when the human claimed that Annette was not as weak as Usha thought. Suzuki drops his mask of arrogance and reveals a real fear as he watches his main skill being dismantled right in front of him. Impulsively, he grabs the dagger on the ground and nearly takes his own life with it. However, Sensei stops him because he needs the boy alive to finish his book. Speaking of which, the author questions Suzuki about his story to continue his project. Whether intentional or not, this question takes the boy back to his past on Earth, where he was a weak kid who couldn't stand up to the bullying he endured. Suffering verbal and physical abuse almost daily, Suzuki was treated like a pet by older kids, like a mistreated dog who could do nothing but stay there and take the beating. Incidentally, the way he describes his condition is a way to explain his gift in Zauberberg, which allows him to control other beings. The only escape Suzuki saw was ending his own life, but he didn't even have the courage to do that. His life was surrounded by the consequences of his cowardice in the face of people's cruelty, and in that environment he felt that no one could help him in any way. Then one day Suzuki was hit by the truck that brought him to Zauberberg. In this world, unlike on Earth, where he was a miserable sufferer, he is now a hero with the responsibility to save this place from the tyrannical grip of the Demon King of Wrath, using a gift that made him extremely powerful. As time passed, Suzuki adapted to the environment and his domestication ability, eventually bringing wild wolves to his side to be his companions. Even so, despite the promise of being a hero in this world, Suzuki wasn't treated as as such. On the contrary, the inhabitants of Zauberberg were as malicious as the humans on Earth. The difference now was that the boy had the power to react, and he wouldn't let this opportunity slip by. In any case, Suzuki doesn't believe he's done anything truly wrong because in his mind, no matter which world he inhabits, he will always be a nobody without determination as he is now. After the transferred one tells his story, Sensei is satisfied to conclude his novel based on Suzuki, a weak man who hoped to live as a hero in another world but couldn't even become a villain due to his own weakness. That's why Sensei titles the book Failure in Another World. Sensei thanks the kid for providing the necessary content for a book, but he can't call this novel a masterpiece. For this reason, Sensei tears out one of the pages, creating a magical circle to summon transfer student. With the circle's power flowing in reverse, Suzuki is sent back to where he came from. Shocked by what she saw, Annette checks Sensei's status and notices that he now possesses the gift of writing, and Usha believes this might be a special ability only activated against other transfers, which could mean the author was brought to Zauberberg specifically to fight these humans who were supposed to be the heroes of this magical world. Frustrated, Sensei collapses to the ground, utterly dejected after failing once again to write his definitive work. In his mind, he wonders if he will ever find the person who will inspire him in the best way, but he's certain that day hasn't come yet. Watching the dramatic scene, Usha wonders who this guy really is. Finally, despite having caused the boy's return to Earth, Sensei asks what happened to Suzuki. In the middle of Vale City, the wolves that were once tamed by the transfer students lost their imaginary collars and were now free to leave. Likewise, Tama was no longer Suzuki's pet. Emerging from inside a barrel after all this confusion, she freaks out, not understanding anything that happened. Meanwhile, Usha gives Sensei what he wanted most, a brand new coffin with impeccable craftsmanship and golden details that match the object's intense black. After that, Usha talks to Annette about how this human might play an important role in Zauberberg and that his journey will certainly be very difficult and painful. Annette thinks the priestess will prevent her from accompanying the man for this reason, just as she did the first time. However, now Usha insists that her friend stay by Sensei's side precisely to protect him from the evils to come in this world. With everything in place before Sensei leaves, Usha asks him if Suzuki became like this because he gained more power than he deserved, but the author isn't sure if that was the main reason. Either way, Usha fears that the young man will return to a miserable life in his original world, but Sensei doesn't believe Suzuki will repeat the same story he's lived so far. It's up to him to decide if he will write his masterpiece or not based on what he learned and suffered in Zauberberg. Speaking of which, Suzuki has already returned, submitting his resume at the local market to get his normal life back. The interviewer asks why the young man dropped out of school, and this question brings back memories of Zauberberg that justify his absence. Seeing that the interviewee became anxious with the question, the man understands it must be a delicate subject and decides to give Suzuki a chance, asking him to start his new job tomorrow. As he leaves the market, the boy feels the cold of the snow along with the sound of the wind and extends his hands to appreciate the snowflakes melting on his skin. Meanwhile, in Sontag, a northeastern region of Zauberberg, the renowned Weiss Cathedral is attended by members of the Papal State, including Usha and Bishop Wolf, a clergyman bold enough to drink within the sanctuary. According to him, reality is for those who can't handle alcohol. On the other hand, the drink helps him endure the stinky dwarves he has to deal with every day, unlike his colleague who works with the demi in her jurisdiction. Suddenly, a servant of God with a strangely demonic appearance reminds Wolf that he shouldn't make such prejudiced comments in the Papal State. Being the first non-elf appointed as a priest, this goblin reached the rank of archbishop through exemplary work, which doesn't necessarily please all church members. Feeling provoked, Wolf points his finger at his colleague's face and asks if the goblin wants to switch jurisdictions with him, since he always gets the hardest jobs. The colleague reminds him that the tasks clerics receive depend on their behavior in the church, meaning the elf should correct his habits instead of pointing fingers at others. During this exchange, Cardinal Miller asks everyone present to take a seat. With everyone at the table, he would like to request that each member report on their their region, but first he needs to address another matter. Interrupting the meeting, a clumsy cleric arrives at Weiss Cathedral via teleportation, stumbling and falling face first in front of her colleagues. As the others didn't recognize her, the cardinal introduces her as the new bishop of the Erston Temple and takes the opportunity to ask everyone to introduce themselves to the newcomer while giving their reports. First up is Annette's substitute in the Deanstark region, the Holy Land of Mountains and Flames. Her name is Aria, an inexperienced cleric who forgets to mention that Charlotte, the daughter of the King of Roth, inherited the throne, earning a scolding from the cardinal. After this blunder, the goblin finally introduces himself as Elton, Archbishop of the Virden Temple in the Midwalk region, the Holy Land of Lakes and Water, where according to him peace reigns under his jurisdiction, a testament to the Pope's authority. He also warns Aria that it is strictly prohibited to be late, putting a look of panic on the young elf's face. Next, Wolf introduces himself as the cleric of the Dritten Temple located in the Samstag region. This is the Holy Land of deserts and earth, and although it is far from the other regions, they are managing well. The cardinal mentions frequent conflicts among the dwarves, and Wolf highlights that he was almost assaulted while trying to mediate a dispute. Lastly, Usher reports that she leads the Zweiden Temple. A few days ago, in her jurisdiction of Donnerstag, the Holy Land of forests and wind, an otherworldly inhabitant went on a rampage and destroyed half of the city of Vale, and Usha is mobilizing labor to repair the area. By coincidence, Miller convened this meeting to discuss the transferred individuals, as the Demon King of Wrath was defeated by a group of these summoned humans. Consequently, the Pope decided to seal the magic circles that connect the other world to Zauberberg to stop the summoning of transferred individuals. With this news, Elton expresses joy at seeing his people free from the Demon King, while Wolf is glad to be rid of the humans. However, Miller announces that this story is far from over, as the 7 transferred individuals who defeated the Demon King of Wrath have taken the demon's lands for themselves. Recently, the Pope received a declaration from the 7 stating that they would use their power to transform Zauberberg into a utopia. This situation was a real blow to the Pope, who believed the transferred individuals were angels sent to save this world. These beings, once considered children by the papal authority, now see him as prey. In other words, a war has been declared between the transferred individuals and the World Church of Helsahan, as these true fallen angels begin to show their claws in various regions of the Free Kingdom. Likewise, Waldelia, the daughter of the Demon King of Wrath, cannot be ignored for possibly harboring a burning desire for revenge. In light of these events, Miller announces that Zauberberg has entered a new era, and it is the Church's mission to overcome these obstacles and maintain peace. Aria questions how they will be able to face such powerful beings, and this question triggers Usha, who recalls the image of Sensei cutting through the sky with his power before a mighty transferred individual. She then declares that she met a transferred individual in Vale capable of returning others summoned to their world of origin through his gift. Upon hearing these words, the Pope himself agrees with his friend Usha, as he also believes this angel could be Zauberberg's hope. As he approaches and sees his subjects kneeling before his holiness, he asks Usha to tell more about this human. Meanwhile, on the other side of the trenches, a woman hums a cheerful song that contrasts with the dark environment that once belonged to the most powerful demon. Nearby, a man wants to know if the lady is thinking about her beloved again, but she ignores the question. As 2 glasses of wine are served at the table by the man, aware that his question won't be answered, he informs her that their allies have departed for various lands, while the 2 of them stayed to observe what is in store for this world. In the meantime, what awaits the exhausted Annette and Tama is a well-deserved rest in the city they just arrived at before hitting the road again toward Grun. As soon as she celebrates the opportunity to sleep in a warm bed, the cat receives the news that she has leveled up to 17 from carrying the coffin, so much making her wonder if this is something to celebrate. Keeping an eye on the conversation, a kid points out the direction of the town's inn and offers any information that might help the travelers. Since they don't know the area, they sit with the boy to better understand their surroundings. First, he tells them about an organization called the Hero Introduction induction service, also known as the transferred order service, where people are assigned to accompany groups with little self-confidence and provide them with a safe and comfortable journey. By the way, it was the boy himself who created this service. Hearing this, Tama doesn't recall having a good experience with transferred people, so she can't help but show a sour face. The kid takes offense at the cat's disdain because according to him, the transferred are heroes sent to save this world. In fact, if the ladies hire this service, he can introduce them to a summoned hero right now for just 4 zinzenzenzengenicos. Tama is ready to refuse the offer, but Annette cuts her off, already handing the money to the boy. Tama reminds her that 4 zinzenzenzen doesn't grow on trees, but the elf thinks it's pocket change if it means keeping Sensei safe. At the same time, the boy makes a face like he's taken advantage and asserts that a life has no price because the dead man in the coffin is surely seeking his safety in the other world and would be smiling in heaven if he knew a hero was accompanying his 2 friends. With that said, Sensei opens the coffin and apologizes for still being alive, almost giving the boy a heart attack as he yells that the corpse said something. Sensei feels offended because although he wants to become one, he is not yet a dead man. Annette assures the boy that the man is a hero, but the kid doesn't think heroes look like zombified vampires. In any case, he grabs the 4 zinzenzenzen from the elf's hand and runs off, not without first saying his name is Nur. Despite looking like a scam, he promises to bring a real hero to the ladies. Tama thinks it's a good idea to have this so-called hero carry the coffin, but the cleric insists on keeping that task for herself. When night falls, the innkeeper is tired of having these people hanging around the reception, so she wants to know if they are staying the night or not. Annette says again that they are waiting for someone, although Sensei knows very well that the boy will not return. According to the author, that rascal has the eyes of an adult. Hearing this description, the rabbit girl deduces they are talking about Nur, the bigmouth, the most wretched and talkative little guy in all of Zauberberg. Upon realizing this, Annette is furious at seeing her 4 zinzenzenzen go down the drain, while Sensei is curious to know Nur, the bigmouth's story. The rabbit girl explains that he is an orphan who started living in the town at some point and makes a living by deceiving unsuspecting visitors. Since there is no adult to educate the boy, he keeps fooling people indiscriminately. Honestly, the innkeeper feels sorry for him sometimes, but that doesn't change the fact that he is deceiving people with this hero story. According to her, if heroes really existed, Nur shouldn't be a street kid in the first place. Far from there, the boy never really had a hero to save him. The reflection seen in the fine blade he carries is only of himself, the only person he has had as company in this lonely journey. That is, except when some people decide to take advantage of a mistake or even steal his belongings, which, although stolen, are the child's means of survival, as he has few ways to protect himself. One of the regional bandit groups takes advantage of the boy's fragility, counting the coins, and notes he has gathered in his path as a child thief, and all Nur wants to know is what they are going to do with him. One of the thugs asks the same question back, making the boy swallow dryly. Then comes the desperation, making him bluff that his transferred friends won't let it slide if he disappears, but the truth is different. The transferred ones the bigmouth mentioned are the very ones who kidnapped him. Showing off his firepower, the leader of the trio displays his crossbow capable of piercing a dragon's armor, the insane weapon. Then he comments that the kid has been making money using the names of the 3 transferred ones, so he will have the honor of bragging in the afterlife about being killed by a hero. With that, with the insane weapon pointed at his head, Nur wonders if these are the heroes who will save the world. Until then, he had never seen a transferred one before, and let's say his first experience is one that turns his life upside down. But before the fatal shot, Sensei arrives and points the transferred one's crossbow at the other's knee, who screams in pain. Another thug uses his divine analysis and discovers that Sensei is also summoned from another world. However, seeing that the man only has 1 life point and is poisoned, he dismisses him as a threat. Thus, the trio's leader points his crossbow at the intruder, who suddenly begins to increase his own HP monstrously. As always, Sensei jokes about the possibility of dying, so he asks the aggressor to shoot him straight in the heart. So as the saying goes, the madman is only mad until he finds a madder one. Respecting this maxim, the tender trio of Groon's surroundings runs away. Soon Nur asks if Sensei is a hero, but the writer doesn't see himself in that glorious way. According to him, adults are young people who have been betrayed, but Nur is still a child who is not ready to become an adult. As he philosophized randomly, the author was leaving the dump, leaving the boy tied up. Nur asks if that's really going to be it, and in Sensei's silence we can assume it is. The next day, the group prepares to head to Grun, and Sensei is pure exhaustion after spending most of the night chasing off transferred ones. Annette is incredibly jealous, thinking that the man was sweet-talking with another lady, especially when he confesses that it was a very pleasant night. Suddenly, the big myth is shameless enough to show his face in front of those he robbed yesterday, but he assures them he didn't lie to anyone. As everyone remembers, he promised to introduce them to a brave warrior, and this hero is standing right in front of them. As Sensei walked, the desire to kick the bucket grew stronger. The urge was so intense that it scared the boy who desperately tried to alert their travel companions that the writer was on his last legs. They got the message, but continued acting as if nothing had happened since they knew the guy well. In fact, Tama used Sensei's brave hero facade to make him pull the living's coffin. After some time, they arrived at Tama's homeland Grun. The cat girl was delighted to be back and went ahead promising to get everyone inside. However, instead of being greeted with fireworks, as she had imagined, the local guards pointed their spears at the group upon seeing Tama and threw them all in jail. For some reason, Tama was separated from the rest, and assumed they were imprisoned because of that troublesome cat girl. He speculated she might have stolen from some noble, but Annette assured that Tama was no thief. Meanwhile, Sensei slept using Milos as a pillow until he woke up and asked the elf how people were executed in this world. The cleric refused to answer, knowing the man was fantasizing about the most beautiful ways to burn. Regardless, knew they needed to escape, so he started to get to work. In seconds, he picked the lock, and Annette was quick to point out that this wasn't a skill of a brave hero. On the other hand, Sensei placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, and expected a big compliment from the depressed author, but instead he wanted to know why the hell the loudmouth got involved in this. To the misfortune of some and the luck of others, the guards noticed the commotion in the cell and tied up the prisoners this time. Sensei questioned if there was going to be that cool execution scaring one of the soldiers. Soon they were sent directly to King Siberian of the Kingdom of Grun. Beside him, Minister Briard accused the intruders of committing serious crimes, with the punishment being execution. After all, according to Siberian, these intruders had kidnapped the kingdom's Princess Matilda. Suddenly, Matilda herself burst into the throne room and told her father once again that she hadn't been kidnapped. She had been visiting various nations to test and develop her martial skills and had met these people along the way. She asked Annette if what she said was true, and the elf, addressing Tama as Your Royal Highness, scared the cat girl but was just desperate to avoid the gallows. Anyway, Tama or Matilda asked her father to free the innocent, but the king refused, much to Sensei's delight. Unless, of course, his daughter swore never to act like a little girl again, but as a true member of the royalty like her mother La Palma. The princess thought about throwing a tantrum, but looked at her friend's situation and gave in, promising to improve her behavior. This meant she could no longer venture out recklessly, so this was goodbye. With that, Matilda left the throne room and the prisoners were released. Next, the group went to an inn to eat something after spending a few hours in prison, and showed he wasn't a loudmouth just when it came to lying, as he devoured meat like there was no tomorrow. After all, he wasn't used to eating something of this quality, so he couldn't be judged. As for Sensei, the author was even crazier after missing the chance to go to the guillotine, so he turned to sedatives. Mentioned that he had no idea Tama was a noble of this country, while Annette remembered the times she had been rude to the Catwoman, which is why she was scared when the possibility of the gallows arose. While serving more food to the travelers, the waitress heard them talking about Matilda and asked if they knew her, as her name was Kajika, and she had served as a lady in waiting to the princess in the palace. Said they had been traveling together until yesterday, when the king dragged the girl back to the castle. Taking advantage of Kajika's presence, Sensei assumed she knew what had happened between Tama and Siberian and asked her to tell him so he could record it in his notes. Whether she wanted to or not, he recapped his story with the cat girl and admitted she had a fascinating life. Annette reminded them it was dangerous to dig into a princess's past, while noted it wasn't wise to casually call the noble Tama, but Sensei didn't care if she was royalty or a barmaid in a shady Jinzabar. To him, she was still Tama, so Kajika agreed to tell what she knew. Meanwhile, Matilda recalled with humor how Annette and Nur reacted when they discovered she was a princess while Sensei acted as usual. The memories made her worry about her friends until she saw through the window a lone figure on the roof of a house. This person opened his grotesque mouth and invoked a power that devastated the throne room's roof. With the structure ruined, the king arrived with some guards and saw a man sitting on his throne lamenting that he had never tamed a demi-woman, though pleased that there were many of this race here. His name was Kaibara, one of the heroes who had killed the demon king and saved the world, though now known as the fallen angel of gluttony. Siberian knew well that this was one of the 7 fallen angels, as the World Church of Helsahan had warned, so he imagined this creature hadn't come with good intentions. With doubt, the king asked the obvious, and Kaibara announced that he had come to consume the entire nation. Immediately, Grun's soldiers stood ready, promising to prove why they were called a nation of warriors. However, as soon as they advanced against the enemy, the fallen angel of gluttony used his cursed mouth to devour the guards mercilessly, and with each bite that grotesque mouth took, the man was also fed. As he had imagined, demi-flesh was muscular and tough, horrible to eat. Although often seen as gluttonous, Kaibara is picky about what he eats. He's not after the tough flesh of a warrior from Grun, but rather the tenderness of a young demi-woman. Outraged, Siberian orders his men to stand back, leaving Briard worried that his majesty wants to intervene alone. As the king of this nation, the leader announces that he will not allow the angel of gluttony to leave here alive. Being level 56 and possessing the divine beast's fist, the revered Siberian steps in front of the enemy. Kaibara finds the concept of a warrior king interesting and tests whether this one truly lives up to the title. Summoning the dark abilities that earned him the title of Fallen Angel of Gluttony, the transferred one attacks the king of Grun with all his veracity. However, the seasoned warrior evades the threats with his immense skill. In retaliation, Siberian uses the thunder ability through his wild cat palm technique. Mocking the leader of these people, Kaibara pretends to be hurt as a form of disdain. Certainly, this ability would kill an ordinary man, but Kaibara had devoured golems that turned his body into armor itself. In response, Siberian removes his bracelets and clenches his fist to conjure his ultimate technique. Regardless, the transferred one shows no fear, so Siberian charges at his opponent. At the same moment, Tama appears and calls for her father. Kaibara quickly realizes he is facing a young demi, and the princess recognizes the man from the rooftop. Tama steps up to fight, but her father tells her to stand back, saying she cannot replace Leon. That said, Kajika mentioned that Matilda had a twin brother who would inherit the throne, and his name was Leon. The people of Grun believed their civilization would have peace and prosperity under the rule of the valiant Leon and the kind Matilda, but 10 years ago a storm struck one night. While returning to the castle, Prince Leon and Queen La Palma fell victim to a landslide. With their deaths, the king became reclusive and depressed for a long time. Matilda saw her father suffering and didn't know what to do until she confided in her loyal maid Kajika, who decided to take Leon's place as the warrior heir he always wanted. However, instead of soothing the king's mind, this decision only brought conflict between father and daughter, and the consequences of that are seen to this day. During the battle, Siberian claims that Matilda's abilities are useless, which enrages the young girl and makes her attack recklessly. Without holding back, Kaibara launches his monstrous mouth at the girl, prompting Siberian to save his daughter at the cost of losing part of an arm to those sharp interlocking teeth. Kaibara mocks the father's love for his daughter while lamenting that Siberian can no longer use his ultimate technique without the arm he just lost. The angel makes sure to emphasize that he has just chewed the king's limb. Tama furious charges at Kaibara again, so Briard grabs the princess before she can be killed and flees with her, now unconscious. Coincidentally, upon reaching the middle of the city, the minister encounters the travelers who brought the heiress and warns them that a transferred one is attacking Grun. At that moment, an explosion occurs, alerting the entire population. When everyone looks at the scene, the dust settles, revealing King Siberian chained and kneeling before all. Kaibara introduces himself as the new king of this land and announces that he will not be an oppressive ruler, but needs to fulfill his desire to consume consume the demi-flesh living here, focusing on the weak ones. A commoner throws a stone at the transferred one, who swallows the demi without ceremony, causing panic among the population. Around the city, monsters prevented the inhabitants from fleeing, while Sensei wrote a story in his notebook. Soon he takes Tama's hand and understands that she is the heroine of a tragedy, but the heroine he seeks would never accept her tragedy meekly, so the princess needs to wake up and show the rest of her story. Unconscious, Matilda dreamed of advice she once received from Kajika, then woke up in this old friend's house and panicked to know what had happened when she fainted. Briard explains that the fallen angel took the capital and held her father hostage, so she returns to her furious state and this time prevents the minister from trying to control her. Annette mentions the tragedy of the Clolone Pass, which took the lives of Tama's brother and mother. According to her, there isn't a citizen who hasn't shed a tear over this tragedy, proving that the people love the royalty of this nation. In other words, if they lose Matilda too, it will be even worse for them. Therefore, the cleric wants Matilda to stay out of this. After all, Annette knows a secret along with Sensei to return the transferred ones to where they came from. Matilda understands the situation and lets her friends go. Then the group encounters two ogres guarding a passage further ahead. Sensei steps forward and claims to the monsters that he and his colleagues came to be eaten after being moved by the king's speech. Knowing the author's history, his friends worry that he is serious, while the ogres, not expecting this, have no idea how to react. Thus, within some time, the trio was behind bars again, and Annette began to rant about having her freedom taken away. Sensei confesses that death is a good thing, but that this is not the moment for that. Then he takes Nur's hat, where he finds the clip that the boy must use once again to save the group. Meanwhile, Minister Briard arrives in Matilda's room to deliver soup to her, but the princess had escaped through the window. In the throne room, Kaibara reflects on which demi he wants to devour next, with Siberian in a state of absolute rage beside him, chained and bloody. Soon the ogres arrive to tell the story of the human who wants to be eaten, but Tama interrupts with brute force, knocking down the monsters without mercy. Siberian regrets that his daughter made this decision, unlike the fallen angel of gluttony, who rejoices to see his most desired dish before him once again. When Matilda was a child, she loved watching her father and brother train in martial arts. She couldn't participate because she was a girl, and her destiny was always to be a princess like any other. Siberian was hard on his son because one day he would be king and needed to be strong enough to carry the entire kingdom on his shoulders. The seasoned Briard remarked that the boy had a kind heart, but Siberian only cared about his strength. At the same time, he noticed Matilda through the window and scolded her for getting into trouble outside. Seizing the moment of her father's attention, she asked if she could train too. The king, however, roared that she needed to know her place as a princess. Matilda was furious, but there was nothing she could do to change that, so she ended up obeying. In her room with her mother, Matilda confessed that she hated her father because he wouldn't let her practice martial arts like Leon. Being honest, she didn't want to be born a princess. Seeing her daughter's distress, La Palma hugged Matilda and urged her to listen carefully to what she was about to say. Whatever it was that Matilda heard, she now found herself in a life or death situation before the fallen angel of gluttony, who boasted about luring his prey by using her father as bait. Still, the princess swore she would defeat Kaibara with her own hands. The invader planned to toy with his food before devouring it, striking the girl with her father's secret technique. Ironically, Kaibara had stolen the king of Grun's ability and named it gluttony, perverting the entire local tradition with his petty arrogance. By consuming someone's flesh, the fallen angel would steal their abilities, and now he used them to humiliate the princess, who would die by the skills of her own father. Meanwhile, Sensei was carrying Annette and Nur to an unknown location. The two wanted to go straight to the invader and resolve the situation, but the author had another plan in mind. As they entered a door, Annette saw a painting on the wall and realized they were in the queen's room. As Sensei rummaged through everything, the elf and the boy tried to convince him not to do so in such an important person's quarters. But if there was one thing Sensei wasn't afraid of, it was the consequences of his actions. So, he called on Nur to do his part and open a locked drawer. Once opened, they found a book inside. Matilda was exhausted, completely at the mercy of such a powerful opponent, and humiliated by being defeated by the tiger's kick and the lion's blade, techniques well known by Siberian as the trademarks of the kingdom's protector. The protector, who who now watched his daughter being destroyed before his eyes. Kaibara continued to taunt her, emphasizing what her father had always said, that her martial arts were useless. This statement brought Matilda back to a childhood memory where she questioned why Leon trained all the time since he had said he didn't like fighting. Leon confessed that he wasn't good at it, but that was exactly why he needed to work twice as hard, because one day he wanted to be as strong as their father and be able to protect his sister, his mother, and everyone in the kingdom. With this memory in mind, Matilda was overcome with sadness, but her determination drove her to rise again. Siberian ordered his daughter to stand down, but the fact was, she was following in her brother's footsteps. He would never give up in such a situation. Seeing this, Kaibara found her will to keep fighting increasingly amusing, which made him even more excited to consume her flesh at the end of it all. This sensation of euphoria made the invader certain that his pathetic life in the past had been worth enduring. In his previous world, it was as if he were dead inside, even though he had been born in a huge mansion and always had everything money could buy, because his parents gave him everything he wanted. Each day, his table was filled with more luxurious dishes, but his soul grew emptier. Out of this emptiness grew a need to feel alive, and in pursuit of that, Kaibara did something no one would have expected. During an ordinary lunch, he stood up and attacked a servant with a fork. Yet, he still didn't get exactly what he wanted, so his desire remained unfulfilled. His parents paid a large sum to keep the servant quiet while Kaibara remained untouched, spoiled, and dissatisfied, like an animal trapped in a cage. Everyone called him fortunate, but all the young man felt was the total misery of his heart. On his last day on Earth, he attacked a homeless man who was eating peacefully, for no reason, certain that he was the most miserable person in the world, so much so that he felt a thrill when the truck came barreling toward him. Now, in this alternate world, he could eat whatever he wanted whenever he wanted, so his petty desires were finally met. Speaking of which, he decided it was time to feast on the Princess of Grun, so he launched his enormous mouth at the demi. However, Sensei appeared with his notebook and somehow made the mouth stop midway. According to the author, this guy's story was boring, unbearable to listen to. Not understanding anything, Kaibara snapped his fingers a few times, but when nothing happened, he asked who this person was. Surrounding the fallen angel, Nur and Annette cornered the enemy, and the cleric warned that the zombie-like person in front of him could send invaders back to their original world. So, she asked Sensei to write Kaibara's story using his storyteller ability, but the writer refused because it wasn't worth writing about this dull man who boasted about his own misery. This offended the fallen angel, who claimed to be a predator, and unleashed his immense power like a bomb, isolating Matilda with brute force. He then vowed that before he devoured the demi's flesh, he would finish off each of the others present. Just like Matilda, Nur was also thrown back, and Annette worried about the child's fall. Matilda blames herself for everything that's happening. After all, she was the one who insisted on fighting. She couldn't stop Sensei, Annette, and Nur, and she tried to take Leon's place, which led to the current situation. So when Sensei places his hand on her shoulder, she asks what she can do now. He then pulls a book from his sleeve, dedicates the story to Matilda, and hands it to her to read. In the end, it was worth writing about the demi's fate. As soon as Tama opens the book, the pages magically fly toward the sky. Amidst all this, Kaibara is attacking Annette, who needs to protect Nur, so she shields him as best as she can. Sensei comments that the more he learned about Matilda's past, the more he realized that she suppressed her feelings because she was so kind and clumsy. Because of this, throughout her childhood, she was trapped by her father's vision of the ideal princess that Matilda was supposed to be. Then, after the family tragedy that took her mother and brother, the girl tried to lift her father's spirits by trying to take the place of his son, who was seen as the ideal prince. In doing so, the princess's most sincere feelings were never understood and remained hidden until today, as Matilda never had the chance to be who she truly is. As a result, instead of getting closer to her father by imitating Leon, Matilda only created more distance between them. One day, her mother told her who she should be, and Sensei shows the page that recalls that part of the story. On the day La Palma asked for her daughter's attention, she told her that Matilda's life is hers alone and she should live it as she pleases. Matilda comments that her father would never allow that, so La Palma smiles and promises to convince the king to give the girl more freedom. After all, she emphasizes all her father wants is to see his daughter happy. Since then, Matilda found herself at a crossroads, torn between living as her father wanted wanted, or as an ideal prince in her brother's place. Struggling, the Demi couldn't decide which path she preferred, but Sensei knows well that neither of these options is ideal for her. After all, she is Tama. Hearing the name given to her in her recent adventures, the princess sees the pages of her story shatter like glass along with the chains that had imprisoned her. With that, Sensei tells her that it's up to her to write the rest of the story. The divine beast's crest then glows in Matilda's hand, astonishing her father. Leon already knew about this hidden power because he once saw the crest appear on his sister. On that day, he was going to run and tell their father, but his sister asked him not to because Siberian didn't want Matilda involved in martial arts. As she said this, she saw her crest weaken more and more while Siberian watched his children talk unseen. Since that day, he knew that the light never appeared again in the girl's hand, and he knows it's his fault for locking away his daughter's natural gifts in an excessive attempt to protect her from danger. Finally, he asks for her forgiveness. However, Kaibara has just digested the king's flesh, which boosts his powers to the maximum. According to the fallen angel, if this were a manga or anime now that Tama has awakened her powers, she would defeat the villain and have a happy ending, but he assures that won't happen. With that said, Sensei is eager to see what happens. According to him, although we are often deceived by hope, we are similarly deceived by despair. Even when we are pushed into the depths of panic, we will find a thread of hope. With those words, Tama charges at the opponent, using the cat's distraction followed by the cat's headbutt, which for the first time injures the fallen angel of gluttony. Enraged, Kaibara recklessly counterattacks, so Tama seizes the moment to invoke her ultimate technique of the divine beast's banquet king's fangs, and this strike obliterates the enemy with unimaginable power. After the victory, Tama faints, so Annette slowly heals her companion. Sensei returns La Palma's book to Siberian, who thanks the writer for guiding his daughter in this moment. In response, Sensei says he merely wrote his book. Briard notes that the princess awakened the ultimate technique king's fangs, but that her power is still incomplete. As he finishes speaking, Kaibara revives to his own surprise, sustained by the gigantic body of a demonic insect. Having secretly consumed the flesh of the deceased demon king, he feels infinite power surging within him, then raises his beastly form to destroy every living soul in the chamber. However, Waldelia suddenly appears and decapitates Kaibara. Even headless, the fallen angel takes advantage of the demon king's daughter's presence to remark on how delicious her father's flesh was, so she ends it all with an impressive display of power. Sensei greets the girl with sad eyes and asks if she feels any better after avenging one of her father's tormentors, but Waldelia doesn't respond and warns that she will eliminate the author next time before leaving with her dragon Ruka. Sensei then confesses that one day he would like to write the story of the girl who avenged her father's death, but whose sadness never faded. The next day, the heroes are thanked for saving the royal capital of Grun. Tama decides to stay at the castle to support the king, and though she will miss her friend, Annette respects her decision. Speaking of her, the princess receives a visit from her father in her room, and he advises her to continue her journey with the comrades she came with. He doesn't feel so old that he needs the protection of a novice, but he asks her to return at the end of her journey. Thus, Tama doesn't hesitate before taking off her princess dress and promising her father that she will one day be as strong as he is. As his daughter departs, Siberian takes his wife's book and remembers her and their deceased son. Meanwhile, Sensei tells Nur that he doesn't have much talent for carrying coffins, so the guy tells him to walk on his own since he's doing poorly. However, the author says it won't be necessary. Just as he finishes speaking, Tama comes running to rejoin the group. In just a few days of travel, Tama points out the largest tree in the Zauberberg region, known as the World Tree of Grun. Sensei comments on its overflowing vitality, while Annette adds that no matter how many times she passes by, her spirit is always renewed. The cat girl jokes about their comments, and Nur quickly reminds her that the compliments weren't meant for her. The cleric explains to the writer that this is a sacred tree that watches over Zauberberg and grants protection to all who visit it. Nearby is the peaceful village of Toriko, where people live a simple life close to nature. Finally, the elf suggests they stop to say a prayer for a safe journey, but Tama, who was trying to tell the whole story of the tree by herself, loses her patience with her friend's chatter and lunges at her. A few minutes later, they reach the welcome sign of Toriko, And although they thought it might be some kind of hippie village where everyone claps for the sun, reality was far from it. The place was a massive casino for the transferred who would proudly lose their money and stab each other without the slightest remorse. Nur had imagined something different for this village, while Sensei explains that water takes the shape of its container, so there must be a reason Toriko turned out this way. By the way, with his sedatives running out, the author asks if there's a sacred tree nearby where he can hang himself. Annette suggests they speak with the mayor while Sensei eats pebbles off the ground to curb his craving for sedatives. Later on, they ask the mayor what's going on with the village, and he explains that a few months ago, some of the transferred who came to see the world tree started living there. They built the gaming hall, which attracted the worst types from everywhere, thus stealing the simple and tranquil lifestyle of Toriko. To illustrate his point, the mayor picks a leaf from the world tree and shows that not only this one, but all of them have been weakening over time, a sign that the tree's spirit is sad. For this reason, the old man asks if the travelers would be able to restore peace to the village, so Sensei tries to negotiate a new pot of sedatives in exchange for some help. Overhearing the conversation, Yamada, a knight in gleaming luxurious armor, offers to resolve the situation. Given everything they've been through with the transferred, the group remains on guard, and the knight understands their distrust, but assures them he's different from the others. Kneeling, Yamada declares he seeks only peace and asks for permission to save the world tree, while Annette tries to motivate Sensei for the mission, pointing out that they found an important ally, only to realize that the guy had simply vanished from the area. Not far away, he walks with a straight back and lungs full of air, meaning he needs to do something about it, because having a healthy body is the last thing he wants. A little further ahead, he finds a hollow tree emitting smoke and senses that this place reeks of immorality, so he immediately dives in. To his delight, inside, there's a group of transferred exhaling smoke, so he rejoices in the unhealthy and corrupt atmosphere of this hole. He asks for a puff from anyone willing to share the substance until a woman touches the writer's face and invites him to an even more fun place than this. Soon the two head to a closed tavern where Sensei drinks alone, to the point that the woman questions the reason for such excess. He explains that he wants to drink until he dies because his life is so miserable he can't bear it. The woman lightly laughs at his strange behavior and asks what he was doing in that cave, since it's where the addicts of the world tree's analgesic leaves hang out. Sensei says he lost something important to him, and that the idea of his mind and body becoming healthy again keeps him awake at night. Given that the woman claims she will help him sleep soundly because despite her appearance, she is a dancer. Sensei doubts that watching someone dance is fun in any way, but she insists on giving him a brief performance, so with a violinist playing in the background, she flaunts her impeccable moves before the author, who despite his initial reluctance gives in to the moment and admits his night is turning out to be quite pleasant. On the other hand, Annette can't say the same, considering that Sensei's sudden disappearance drives her to despair. After all, he hasn't shown up since yesterday. However, just as she mentions him, he appears in the area being carried by an attractive woman, which drives the cleric from despair to madness. The mayor calls the dancer by the name Esh and asks what's going on, reminding her that he had already told her not to show up there. Embarrassed, Esh explains she just came to drop off the man and leaves. Tama asks who that woman was, so the mayor explains that Esh is known as the Witch of Tonriko. When the transferred began arriving in droves and built the gaming hall, the villagers didn't have the power to stop them, but Esh did. She alone gained the favor of the fallen transferred and opened a bar next to the casino, which led the villagers to see her as being on the invaders' side. Besides that, other than being a mysterious woman who lived on the outskirts of the city, no one knows her origin or age. The mayor says he left her alone because she seemed harmless, but the truth is that Esh is a trickster who makes a fortune charming the transferred with her drinks and dances. For this reason, the residents started calling her the traitorous witch. Yamada comments that Esh should face a fair trial for siding with evil to make money, and the mayor thanks him for the help offered, asking that the village be saved once and for all. The following morning, Annette has to chase after Sensei once more throughout the city as the battle against the transferred ones is about to begin. Despite this, he doesn't recall agreeing to such a dangerous job. What he really needs is the peace and tranquility that Bar offers. The elf insists on bringing her friend back, but Yamada pulls her aside and claims that the writer has been enchanted by the witch, but once the evil that plagues this village is destroyed, those affected will return to their natural state. Arriving at the bar, Sensei thanks thanks Esh because it was thanks to her that he momentarily forgot his painful life and allowed himself to dream. The woman is pleased to have been useful, but warns him that she is called a witch by the townsfolk due to behaviors like the one from the night before. Playfully, she asks not to be blamed if she ruins the writer's life, but that's exactly what he wants. Laughing at the man's eccentric stance, Esh offers a toast so that the spirit of the world tree may grant protection to Sensei's painful life. He asks what this story about the tree's spirit is, and she tells him that according to legend, when the spirit of the world tree descends, the wishes of the weak and sick will be granted and they will be saved. Therefore, Esh advises Sensei to ask for the tree's blessing to ease his pain a little. He questions whether she herself doesn't wish to be saved, as he saw last night that her dance was beautiful, delicate, and above all full of sorrow. Caught off guard, Esh struggles to respond, but suddenly several customers enter eager to drink. Among them is a transferred one demanding the money some guys owe him, but they spent the payment money at the gaming hall. He guarantees that if he's not paid today, he'll bury the 3 debtors in the Samstag Desert with his powerful lion ant ability. After scaring off the men, the collector asks the boss if they should relocate the casino, as the company's profits have dropped significantly due to the recent lack of fools like those. Still, the boss hopes to attract people from the other side of the bridge, confident that showing them the joy of gambling and the sedative leaves of the world tree will bring them all to Tonriko. Esh serves the 2 their drinks and reminds them that they had promised to keep the games only for the transferred ones and leave the villagers in peace. However, the businessman states that business is business and that the bar owner herself will profit from the influx of people. Nevertheless, Esh doesn't care about money. She even pays a fee specifically for the transferred ones to keep the locals out of this. Ignoring the traitor, which the boss orders Sabu, his subordinate, to kidnap some people and make them smoke a few leaves as a test. Esh tries to stop the man from doing this, but Sabu throws her aside. Sensei steps in to help, stating that in the world he comes from, people don't call women like Esh witches. In his opinion, this woman is an angel. Outside, a loud crash can be heard, and the statue head of the casino nearly falls on the thugs. Sabu rushes to the gaming hall and sees the place wrecked with a group standing in front of the debris. As the transferred ones arrive, Yamada steps up and denounces the swindlers and the witch who works with them. Sword in hand, he declares it's time for punishment. Sabu sends his men after the knight, but Sensei arrives just in time and grabs everyone's attention. He says that Yamada ruined the pleasant dreams the writer was having, and that he hates people like Yamada who shout grand things as if they were the world's heroes. Yamada responds that he has no time for a lunatic transferred one who dishonors the mission they came to accomplish. The author sits down and says that no random sermon is going to change his life, so Yamada tells him to watch the law being enforced before his eyes. Without delay, he uses the justice judgment ability against the transferred ones, forcing the criminals to retreat. The villagers celebrate the victory, but consider Esh a traitor who worked with the imposters. Yamada assures them that the woman has repented for her actions, but the villagers are not interested in forgiving the so-called witch and expel her from the town. Sensei steps in and tells them that this woman fought alone to protect this place, flattering those troublemakers every night to keep them in check and prevent the locals from being harmed by their wrath and greed. Even so, the residents don't believe the story and Esh ends up leaving. Yamada asks the writer if he knew this would happen, to which he replies that the line between good and evil is very thin, but even so, some people prefer to live under the illusion that they are always good. Before they realize it, evil slowly spreads and expels true love without anyone noticing right under their noses. In the end, the village of Tonriko expelled its own protector. After saying this, Sensei heads out of the town with the rest of the group following behind. The mayor celebrates the fact that the world tree has been saved, as it will return to being healthy, and they will be able to sell the sedative leaves on their own now that the invaders have been expelled. He offers 10% of the sales profits to Yamada if he agrees to be Tonriko's bodyguard. Immediately, the transferred hero kneels and recalls Sensei's words about how thin the line between good and evil is. He then questions what he has just done. Meanwhile, Tama comments that the ending of this story left a bitter taste in her mouth, and Annette asks Sensei if he had already figured everything out. He explains that not exactly, because despite what he said to Yamada, he's no different. After all, he couldn't save Esh either. Suddenly, the leaves of the Tree of Life begin to fall like rain, dry and dead, terrifying the inhabitants of Tonriko village. Behind Sensei, an intense light reveals a mysterious woman with long green hair, surprising even the apathetic Sensei, who immediately realizes that it is Esh. The woman thanks him for understanding her and wishes that the man finds some peace in his life before soon departing. Sensei then notices a weight in his sleeve and finds that his jar of sedatives is full again. He places a pill in his mouth and acquires the infinite comatine ability. As the heroes continued their journey, they eventually reached a vast desert where the sun blazed mercilessly. Not even the determined Annette could handle the heat, so she left poor Milos to carry Sensei's coffin. Meanwhile, the writer was outside pleading with the scorching sun to turn him into a pile of ashes. Tama complained that they couldn't see anything on the horizon and wanted to know if they were on the right path. All Annette could do was hope they were, because she had no certainty. According to the map, they were supposedly taking the shortest route to the Dritten Temple, but sometimes this desert wasn't recommended for people with as little experience in this kind of terrain as they had. Nur was quick to exclude himself from the desert novices category. After all, the talkative kid was practically a human camel, having been born in these lands. With that bit of information, the girls felt a spark of hope as the boy shared some desert walking tips. The first lesson: due to the insane daytime heat, monsters and bandits usually operate at night. No sooner had he said this than a gang of criminals appeared beside the protagonists. One of them announced that the intruders were about to enter the territory of the hunters. His name was Toru, the first chief of the transferred runners hunters, and he demanded that the travelers pay a toll. Tama and Annette weren't in the mood, so they told Sensei to get back in the coffin and prepared to fight. The problem was the poor guy's coffin felt like an oven, so he at least preferred to leave the lid open. Without any hesitation, the Princess of Grun unleashed her tiger kick on one of the thugs, but the transferred man quickly recovered and attacked with his scorpion vehicle, forcing Annette to intervene with her shield to prevent her partner from being hit. In the chaos, Matilda took the opportunity to land another blow on the man, knocking him off his mount. In the midst of this, one of the thugs warned the boss that these women weren't playing around, which Toru agreed with, but he saw in the heat exhausted man his chance to cause some real damage to the enemies. So he revved up his motorcycle and charged mercilessly at Sensei. Annette trusted Nur to protect the writer since he was standing in front of the coffin, but the talkative kid's legs trembled before the hunter's leader. Toru taunted the boy, pointing out that he had never drawn the sword he carried. Nur, enraged, responded that he was a brave warrior. Toru burst out laughing and challenged the kid to prove himself, reminding him that drawing his sword meant he was ready to die. Furthermore, the bandit made sure to emphasize that the venom of his scorpion would bring a painful death within an hour to anyone stung. With that, Toru asked if the boy was ready, but it was Sensei who answered. Craving a dose of that venom, the man climbed onto the scorpion and urged the opponent to prove he wasn't bluffing. Startled, Toru commanded his scorpion to attack, and the arthropod pierced the rider's chest with its tail, injecting the venom. Toru twisted the throttle to maximize the effects, but the result was Sensei's body responding with his own venom, dealing 1200 damage to the scorpion, which shattered entirely like a balloon. Meanwhile, as Sensei wore his familiar frustrated expression, Toru wept over the loss of his beloved Chavez, then charged at the rider with everything he had. Nur tried to react, but his legs were paralyzed with fear. Suddenly, just as Toru was about to strike Sensei with his club, everyone heard the howl of a beast, and one of the thugs urged the leader to retreat, warning that the wolf was coming. Before making a hasty exit with his backup scorpion, Toru vowed to avenge Chavez's death. Once the commotion had died down, the group's cleric healed the writer, while Tama tried to cheer up Nur, who was visibly frustrated at not having been able to act. She assured him that he would find the courage next time, but Nur remained disheartened by his cowardice. He apologized to Sensei. The writer responded that no one is born a hero, and that usually people only grow stronger after being humiliated. Nur seemed moved by his travel companion's strange words, while the elf warned that the howl they just heard was concerning, so they should resume their journey as soon as possible. She also placed her trust in Nur, asking him to lead the way. The boy lifted his head and said he knew of a place where they could stay, and so it was that the talkative kid led the group to the worst orphanage where they planned to spend the night. Some of the children recognized Nur, and among them an old friend Nate ran to hug him along with the others. Soon after, Aunt Kathy also appeared to welcome the unexpected visitors. The caretaker quickly prepared a proper feast to greet the guests, and Nur made a point of saying that nothing beats Auntie's cooking. She mentioned that a very generous person had been donating food to the orphanage, and that she wished she could thank them, but this person never showed up. On the other hand, Sensei found the taste a bit bland, so he asked if there was any synthetic seasoning to give the food a boost, but since no one had any idea what this ingredient from the man's planet was, everyone just stared at him blankly. Nate remembered when Nur had said he wouldn't return until he had become a brave hero. So the talkative kid explained that he had kind of become one after all. He was now part of a group of heroes. The children were fascinated and asked for the names of the heroes, so Nur introduced Sensei. For his part, the man explained that he was just an author who wrote stories, so Nate asked the uncle to tell them one. Soon Sensei began a tale about a man who dumped his debts on a friend and then fled to squander his money, but Aunt Nathy asked him to choose a lighter story. At night, Nur watched the children sleeping beside the women on his team until the beast outside began to howl again. Nathy warned that it was a hungry wolf that had been roaming the area, advising everyone not to wander into the desert if they valued their lives. Meanwhile, Sensei wandered through the desert with Milos on his head. The familiar sensed something strange and led the human to a heap of lifeless animals and shattered trees all stained with dark red. Upon seeing the scene, Sensei chuckled lightly and remarked that it was quite interesting. Later during the night, Tama punched Nur in the face, dealing him 2 damage. Tired of taking hits, the boy got up and noticed a shadow passing by the window, quickly recalling Aunt Nathy's warning about the wolf. He grabbed his sword and went outside to check the orphanage surroundings. However, instead of encountering a beast, he found a man on crutches carrying a basket of vegetables. Assuming it was the man who had been donating food to the children, Nur helped him pick up the scattered food. The man explained that he loved seeing the kids smile. Nur asked why he did it in secret, and the man admitted that he liked to watch them eat happily through the window. He also confessed that he had never seen Nur there before. So Nur shared that his parents had died when he was young, and he had grown up with everyone there, though he had since left the orphanage. He also mentioned that the sword he carried belonged to his father, and that he was on a journey to become worthy of it by becoming a brave hero. Moreover, Nur hoped that such a title could bring pride to the orphanage children and give them hope that they too could become someone important one day. The problem was Nur struggled to find his courage when it mattered most. Hearing these words, the man broke down in tears, assuring Nur that his parents were proud of him. He then asked about Nur's travels, and as the boy shared his stories until dawn, Sensei secretly took notes. When morning came, Nur invited the donor inside to meet the children, but the man felt unworthy. Nonetheless, Nur asked if he had any time to spare. Together, they explored the area until they found an oasis and gathered food for the orphanage. Meanwhile, the children played with Sensei, and the women noticed several baskets of food placed at the door. Behind a wall, Nur and the man found amusement in the element of surprise. When night fell again, Nur was completely exhausted and fell asleep without a second thought. But Aunt Nathy woke him to warn that Nate had been taken by the hunters. Outside, Toru and his accomplices demanded the orphanage's leader to show themselves, only to be startled when Tama, Annette, and Nur emerged from the door. Seeing this as his chance to avenge Chavez, the leader ordered his gang to attack. The Catwoman and the elf took up the defense of the orphanage, while the boy trembled with fear once more. Before things could go wrong for the child, the man on crutches returned and pulled him to safety. Away from the battle, Nur cried in frustration for failing to act bravely again, while the man struggled with a memory of 3 men overpowering a young boy. He urged Nur to hide and leave the rest to him. As someone who had been transported, the man had lost something important because of his legs in his previous world, but now he possessed the power to kill evil men who had hurt a kind boy like Nur. As he spoke, the man began to transform into a huge werewolf, while Sensei continued to take notes in secret. Without delay, the wolf tore through the hunters with the memory of his lost loved one in mind. Reflecting on on this, the beast knew that it was wicked men like these who had caused such suffering. At the same time, Nur was flooded with brief memories of the man on crutches in his life, and the man's journey gave the boy the strength he needed to unsheath his sword. However, Nur stepped in front of the werewolf, fearing that his uncle would never return to the gentle man he once was and would be lost in his beastly form. The beast paid no heed to the child and destroyed Toru's mount, but just as he was about to land the final blow on the criminal, Nur defended him with his sword. Consumed by rage, the beast attacked the brave boy, who dropped his sword and opened his arms to death. Seeing Nur's eyes, the uncle saw the person he had lost, and he tried to regain control, gradually returning to his human form. After the battle, the uncle revealed that he had lived alone for a long time, and like Nur, had lost his parents when he was young and led a solitary life. However, one day a boy reached out to him, and it was the first time in his life that he felt someone's kindness, though that happiness was short-lived. On the day some men cruelly beat his friend, he ran away and was hit by a truck. Since arriving in this world, the uncle had thought about this event every single day. After all, because his legs wouldn't move, he couldn't save his friend. However, Sensei questioned whether that was truly the reason he didn't save the boy, or if it was an excuse to hide the cowardice within him. Hearing this, Nur cried out in anger, arguing that not everyone was as strong as the writer, including himself, as he considered himself a coward who had fought to overcome his limits when he could. He then asked Sensei not to judge the man on crutches. In return, the uncle thanked Nur for awakening his courage by preventing him from fully transforming into a beast, and said that such acts were worthy of a brave hero, unlike himself, who saw himself as a coward full of excuses. As he finished speaking, Sensei's pages began to glow, and he acknowledged that while the uncle might be a coward, he was still kinder than most for protecting the orphanage children, killing the creatures of the night, and keeping the evil at bay while feeding the kids. While many who were transferred chose to use their gift for selfish purposes, this man used his to do good. In fact, Nur taught that it was arrogant of the author to describe the uncle as arrogant in his story, which is why Sensei tore out a few pages and made the remaining ones shine. Because of this, the children finally got to meet the wolf man before he left, and they thanked him for the food. Then the transferred one vanished from the desert. Nur asked where he went, but even Sensei couldn't say. Meanwhile, the uncle with the crutch returned to the site of the truck incident, where the boy who had helped him once again reached out his hand to his old friend Seto. Meanwhile, in the lands of the Demon King, where the 7 fallen angels had destroyed the devil himself to steal his throne, a man asks a girl if she's heard what happened to Kaibara, because from what he's gathered, the conquest of Grun has failed. He also mentions that Sengoku is fighting in the desert, challenging the indestructible dwarven fortresses. Reflecting on this, he admits that he underestimated the enemy's ally from Helsahen, as the Storm Mage is an opponent that will surely cause even more trouble. Speaking of which, monsters and dwarves clash in a bloody battle. From atop a siege weapon, Bishop Wolf seems utterly unfazed by the horrific deaths below him, more concerned with the fact that his liquor has run out. Asha complains that he's acting irresponsibly in the midst of a war, but he has the audacity to say she worries too much. In response, the elf grabs him and questions whether this is appropriate behavior for the commander of a nation, but Wolf, for his part, simply sees himself as a humble priest. Their argument is cut short by the approach of more troops from the fallen Angel of Desolation, who orders his freshly arrived forces to join the attack. Faced with a new situation, Asha asks what the leader has in mind to handle it. The bishop then requests Chief Doran, the dwarves' general, to lure the enemies to the eastern flank. The dwarf is furious and retorts that he doesn't take orders from an elf. After all, he's the king of the kingdom of Gelb and will handle things his way. Yet despite his outrage, Doran suddenly follows the bishop's advice and directs the enemies eastward. With that, Wolf prepares his staff and casts a spell called Sturm, undraing a hurricane that quickly wipes out the monsters. King Doran is impressed, while the fallen Angel of Desolation calmly retreats along with his troops. In the midst of this, to everyone's surprise, floating at the eye of the storm is none other than Sensei. After the victory, Chief Doran gathers the troops to celebrate, and during the festivities, festivities blames the church for bringing in these fallen transfers who are causing all the chaos. Wolf asks the dwarf to calm down as there's no need to keep bad-mouthing his superior. Doran responds by calling him a typical lapdog always loyal to his master. Wolf counters by saying they'll expel the fallen angels without the Pope's help, raising his mug in a toast to the bravery of the dwarves. Doran in turn compliments the bishop, saying he's done a fine job for a weak elf, and proceeds to congratulate his war companion. Meanwhile, Tama and Nur take the opportunity to grab some food, while Usher remarks to Annette that she hadn't expected to see them here. Annette the cleric admits it was a coincidence, as she and her group got lost in the desert. By the time she realized Sensei was already caught in a tornado, and the rest is history. Speaking of which, Usher asks where he is, and Annette reassures her that he's fine because he was inside the coffin. Sensei then sneaks up behind the elves and remarks how unfortunate it was that he was inside the coffin at that moment, as that's the only reason he survived yet again, though it did cost him his precious bed. Wolf arrives and greets Annette after not seeing her for a long time, while Milos notices the bishop's familiar and instantly falls in love at first sight. Wolf apologizes for involving Sensei in the conflict and asks if he's alright. Sensei, however, urges the elf to reflect on his inability to kill the author properly. Despite this simply having the chance to experience another near-death moment, Sensei expresses his gratitude to the cleric. To bring the visitors up to speed, Asha explains that the nation is at war with one of the fallen angels. Tama, eager to join in, boasts that she defeated one of these guys back in Grun. Wolf dismissively comments that the angel must have been rather weak for that to happen, angering the Demi, who argues that her people are much stronger than they appear, and that Sensei also has the power to send the transfers back. Wolf acknowledges that he'd already heard this from Usha and mentions that the Pope is quite interested in the writer's ability. However, in Wolf's opinion, they don't need this power, as nothing compares to his own magical prowess. He assures them that the church will handle the fallen angels, advising Sensei to stay out of it instead of playing the hero. With that, he leaves, prompting Tama to question if he's really that powerful. Usha confirms that Wolf is the storm mage, one of the strongest in the world, and not even the fallen angels are a match for his strength. Back at the fallen angels' castle, Sengoku assures his comrades that he'll return to battle tomorrow, and this time he won't be defeated. The angel with the tie suggests changing tactics and letting the women handle things, particularly someone experienced in facing the storm mage, the fallen angel of greed. Meanwhile, back in the kingdom of Jelb, Sensei notices that Milos seems downcast and assumes it's because of that beautiful familiar he met at the party. When Milos confirms it, the author explains that unrequited love is the greatest kind of love, and the anguish that comes with it should be embraced. Hearing this, Milos is horrified by the man's depressed state, so Sensei reconsiders and decides to help the creature find his beloved. After all, they're like two foolish men wandering this world in search of a woman. By the way, since they're on the hunt for the familiar's crush, the author suggests it's important to give her a name. Considering she's practically the female version of Milos, he proposes the name Familos. Apparently, the male familiar thought it was ridiculous, but since Sensei interpreted his reaction as approval, that's what they'll go with. It doesn't take long before they spot the said individual next to Wolf in the middle of the street. The elf is surrounded by several women, all intrigued by his pointy ears and magical staff. Sensei remarks that the elf is quite popular with the ladies, unlike Milos, but reassures him not to be discouraged. The role of a man in love, he says, is to win over the woman he loves in whatever way necessary. With that in mind, the dynamic duo follows Wolf and his familiar through the dark alleys of the city, eventually arriving at a door in a more distant part of town. The elf knocks and announces himself, but receives no reply. He deduces that the woman inside refuses to speak to him again, a situation that surprises Sensei since it seems Wolf is also pursuing his beloved. As the woman won't open the door for the elf, he resigns himself to speaking his mind from the outside. Wolf promises to return alive from the war and do things differently. Sensei, finding it rude to spy on the wizard during such an intimate moment, decides to leave. The next day at Castle Jelb, the king is informed that the enemy forces are attacking from the eastern Jelb dunes. Tama offers his strength to the dwarf leader, but the king tells tells his guests to relax, claiming he'll deal with the fallen angels in no time. After donning his helmet and joining his soldiers outside, Doran teams up with Wolf to command the final battle that will secure Gelb's victory over the fallen angel of desolation. On the front lines, the dwarves use their brute strength to hold back the advancing lizardmen, while the Storm Mage rains down spells from a distance, creating a formidable team on the battlefield. The war is going exceptionally well, and Wolf believes they are crushing the monsters once again. But Usha draws the bishop's attention to a mysterious figure approaching from the west. It's a terrifying creature that conjures a powerful beam from its mouth, decimating part of the front line protecting the fortress. Usha recognizes it as Jade the Black Dragon, a legendary beast once controlled by the Demon King himself. However, Wolf is undeterred, remembering he's slain dozens of dragons before. He prepares his staff to cast a spell. Doran observes the dragon and notices that it's not the Angel of Desolation riding the winged beast, but Wolf doesn't care who it is, declaring that whoever it may be will be reduced to dust all the same. As he says this, the elf watches the dragon approach. When he sees who is mounted on it, he pauses, holding back his magic. The angel descends, visibly happy to see her master again. Caught off guard, Wolf becomes an easy target for a spell cast by his opponent, who lifts him with her dark claws. Usha attempts to intervene, but the claw drains her energy as it touches her. Afterward, the fallen Angel of Desolation assures everyone not to worry, she'll kill them all soon enough, but first she needs to deal with her master. Doran, bewildered, asks what's happening above, prompting Usha to gather her strength and urge the Dwarf King to retreat immediately. She then informs everyone that Wolf has been taken southwest, likely toward the Dritten Temple. However, Usha has no idea who the girl was that took the wizard, only recalling that she called him Master. Doran punches the wall, frustrated by the heavy loss right when the lizardmen are advancing, fearing that at this rate the castle will fall. This creates deep unease among the dwarf warriors, while Sensei tells Milos that Familos's heart is broken over her master being in danger. He then asks what a man should do when he sees a woman cry, causing Milos to literally snap and dash off. Returning to the area where Wolf had been seen trying to talk to a woman, Sensei presumes she might know something about the elf's past that could help. He knocks on the door, asking if he can ask some questions about the Bishop of Weiss Cathedral, and is surprised when an elderly lady answers. Meanwhile, in front of the Dritten Temple, the pupil comments that she shared many meaningful moments with her master in this place. Startled, Wolf utters the name of his former apprentice Yuriko. Soon the temple soldiers arrive to protect the bishop and surround the enemy. Yuriko insists it was thanks to her master that her skills finally flourished, as she extends her dark claws toward the warriors. Considering the girl called Wolf Master, Usha assumes she was once his apprentice, especially since the mage was once passionate about training the transferred before giving it all up to drown himself in drink. Either way, she asks Doran to send soldiers to rescue Wolf, but the king cannot spare any due to the siege. In response, Tama and Annette volunteer for the mission, although they're unsure where Sensei is to confirm this plan. Out of nowhere, the guy walks into the room carrying a lady in his arms. Tama tries to make sense of what's going on, while Annette wonders how this man manages to get so many women in his life. Either way, the team gears up for the mission and gets new equipment from the King of Gelb. Sensei complains that the item he requested still hasn't arrived, so the dwarf explains that the item is confusing the artisans too much. The author grumbles that dwarves think they're the best craftsmen in the universe, while Usha reminds everyone they have an important mission to focus on. Nur agrees, but has no idea how they're going to cross this desert on foot. At that moment, Toru, the chief of the hunters, shows up. Tama gets ready for a fight, but the man didn't come to brawl. Ever since Chief Nur changed his life, he gave up crime, started a bus company for day work, and runs an orphanage at night. To prove it, he casts the Lucifer's Hammer spell on a tiger in the middle of the desert and turns the beast into a bus. Without asking too many questions, the group boards the vehicle, but Toru stops Sensei from getting on because he killed his beloved Scorpion Chavez. Not only that, but he also leaves the rider behind as he slams on the gas. Faced with the situation, Sensei strokes the coffin fragment he has left and remarks it's the only mode of transport he can trust. Either way, Wolf had told him to stay out of the way, and that's exactly what the author intends to do. However, the old lady begs to be taken to Wolf, prompting Sensei to reconsider. Although he's tired of people chasing after their loved ones, he recognizes that this is the seed of every good story.